of the Bill of Rights, that's not a good argument. Now, there is an argument in the Mill tradition that helps, and that's that we also, because we don't have the right to coerce people, we don't have the right to drag people down to a Mapplethorpe exhibit and cement their eyes open and glue their face to one of Mapplethorpe's, you know, pictures to try to, it's hard to do this in a gentle way. Similarly, TV, and this is a very difficult argument for me now because it's hard to know what turning off television would be like. I mean, we used to watch it, now it watches us. How do you turn it off? But, I mean, Mill's idea would be, well, turn it off if you don't like it. Now, that's become more problematic. I really think it has. Because TV plays an enormous role in creating social reality, it is not a simple part of it. It is not a home appliance. That's a big mistake to think about your TV is just an appliance. I mean, to use a Platonic metaphor, it is the eye of God. It's in your house, and it's scary, it's there. It is more real, in a way, and more frightening. In any case, that makes us wonder about whether we could maintain the genuine harm principle or not. But the major way in which this principle has been attacked is because this principle, genuine harm, makes a distinction between self-regarding actions, those that only affect me, and other regarding actions, those that affect other folks. That distinction is where people try to attack the harm principle. Because some people argue there's no such thing as purely self-regarding actions. For example, by Mill's analysis, if someone wants to be a druggie and has a good enough supply of drugs that they don't run out and harm others, because if they do that, then they violate the principle. But if you're a druggie and you want to sit around all your life and do drugs, that's a purely, on Mill's account, self-regarding action, and the state has no business stopping you. On the other hand, if you want to go out and shoot up the neighborhood, hit all the little kiddies, get your face, you know, usually a swarthy one, in one of Barbara Bush's commercials that will later appear in some Republican presidential ad. If you want to go out and do that, you violated the harm principle. Now, here's the possible objection to Mill's principle. Is it really true that there are self-regarding actions? Or isn't it true that the junkie, in his relations with others, which he hardly could separate himself from totally, isn't going to have effects that will lead to genuine harm? So there is room for debate over the harm principle. My own inclination is to stick with it. I mean, that's my inclination. The harm principle, though, you need to understand, is very important to the way that our society understands its legal codes. And some of our best justices have appealed to it over and over. The two principles, I want to mention them again, that stand in the way of it or that are in dispute with it. One is the offense principle I've already mentioned. The other is a principle of paternalism. And it's a principle that I have to admit, given my political proclivities, I have to admit it, it's okay, that the liberal tradition, at least in its earlier incarnations, was guilty of. And that's the paternalism principle, which is we can interfere with people for their own good. That also is inconsistent with Mill. Because on Mill's view of liberty, the best judge of what's your own good is you. Which would have led, if you had believed a Mill-style liberty argument and combined it with an argument I'm about to make in a minute, you would have had an elegant public policy for dealing with poverty. And that's to close down a multi-trillion-dollar bureaucracy and give poor people money under the principle that free people will know better how to spend their money than others will know how to spend it for them. And since what makes poor people poor is that they don't have money, it seems remarkably elegant to solve the problem by giving it to them. It is so remarkably and shockingly elegant all it would do is reduce the population of this city by 1/2. I mean, that's all it would. I mean, you know, and they could go live somewhere else, right? There'd be more room to walk around the parks and stuff. No joke. I mean, if that's poverty, not having money, reducing it would be giving money. And the only counter-argument must come from this sphere of paternalism. That means someone must know better than they do how to spend it. Again, on Mill's grounds, that's not a very good account of liberty. Now, let me give some dimensions to the harm principle, and then I'm through with Mill's account of liberty, even though we'll return to it if you would like. The harm principle has some dimensions that Mill discusses. Harm to others, I've already mentioned, is genuine harm. Mill discusses harm to self. Mill doesn't seem to have a good argument against suicide. Okay? Doesn't seem to. If anything is a self-regarding action, that might look like one. No? That's it. I'm out of it. Don't worry about it. Especially if you leave enough insurance to handle it, right? And it doesn't and so you've got a suicide thing. Okay. Anyway. The way that's been handled in the Mill tradition is that social coercion can be used there if it can be shown that the person engaging in the action, that their decision is encumbered. And it's important that we don't make that a fuzzy principle. By encumbered decision, we mean these examples I've been using, like a potential suicide, a drug addict, or someone who's a headbanger, you know, a psychotic who's a headbanger. Then, even though they're only harming themselves, even by Mill's principles, later Millians have admitted that the state might have the right if their decision is clearly encumbered. But you have to be careful, because you'll get some conservative on the abortion issue arguing that no woman could choose there because under that emotional stress her decision is encumbered. No, that's wrong. Mill's encumbered principle means really encumbered. Crazy, dog drunk, that kind of thing. Not, you know, I'm upset today, so I can't be free. No, you got to be really out of it, okay? The third, there's harm to others, harm to self. Another dimension, which I haven't mentioned yet, is very important to see, and this is one where I think Mill and later people in this tradition have given up too much, and that's that our freedoms can be curtailed if they interfere with the freedoms of others. Not just genuine harm, but if our freedoms interfere with other people's freedoms. Now, while I'll admit that that can sometimes happen, I think that the use of that argument against Mill's strong principle has been largely invidious. That means, you know, you've got the Secretary of State and his hand-picked audience of 8,000 people all cheering and yelling, and one person shouts and they throw him out because he's interfering with the 8,000 people's right to free speech. Well, that's Mill backwards. Because Mill had this idea in order to protect the rights not of everybody who agrees, because you don't need your rights protected. If you're in a room full of 100 people and 90 of them agree on something, they don't need their rights protected on that issue, right? Because they'll agree. It's the 4 or 5 lunatics